joining. This is an interim meeting that we don't always have. However, we felt it was appropriate to do so for a couple reasons. One is we have some new members, and so I think it'd be very helpful to get everybody up to speed in terms of maybe reviewing some past history of the advisory board itself, and then going forward, the county is prepared to offer some clarity in terms of the initiatives that that these dollars are used for. So with that, Jennifer, I'm not sure who's going to present, but Fairfax County is prepared to present, I believe, a nice overview of what's happening in the district. So with that, I'll turn it over to, unless we need to do some administrative items such as roll call and even introductions may be in order, given that we have some new people.
Yeah, I'm just going to take care of housekeeping items and make sure everyone's informed about, what I'm kind of doing in the background as well. So not a surprise to anyone, but welcome everyone. My name is Jennifer Rosales. I'm with the Department of Transportation with Fairfax County within the Coordination and Funding Division. So I'm just going to go over our main housekeeping items for this evening. First and foremost, this meeting will be recorded and transcribed live. This meeting will be posted online to the Tysons Transportation Service District Advisory Board within 10 working days. And to avoid some of the feedback from the audio, we just ask that when other people are talking, you keep your mic on mute, and only the person who's speaking will be off mute. And then for anyone that's calling in, just in case we get anyone that calls in, I'll be able to, help them if they need to unmute themselves or raise their hand. Now, just so also we're clear, I want to make sure that everyone can hear everyone. So if you can't hear someone who's talking at the time, please use the chat function or raise your hand so that we can make sure that we clear the issue before it continues on. And are there any questions about the housekeeping items at the moment? With no hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call. So when I call your name, please just respond by saying here or present and the location from when you're calling in from, like your office or whatever the case may be. All right, so first and foremost, Jim Policaro.
Here, I am calling in from my office in Rockville, Maryland.
Okay, Donald Garrett.
Present. I'm at the meeting from Tysons, Virginia.
Doug Doolittle.
Present, and I'm calling in from my home in Tysons.
David Schneider.
Present. I'm calling from my home in Vienna.
Claudia Diamond.
Present, calling from my home in Tysons.
Chris Boynton.
Present, and I'm calling from my office in McLean.
Linda Colbert.
Hi, I'm at home in in Vienna, Virginia.
May Fang.
Hi, I'm here calling from home, Ashburn, Virginia.
All right, Sally Horn. Not present. William Johnson. Not present. Christopher Opp. Not present. Corey Scott. Not present. Todd Rowley. Not present. Jennifer Barry. Not present. Erica Yalowitz. Not present. And Raymond Baxter. Not present. So just let the record show that at the moment we do not have quorum. All right, the next action item, well, we can't do that one because we don't have quorum. So we'll move on we'll leave the meeting minutes till later on. So, all right, I'm going to go
around the horn introductions. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. So we can go around the horn. We'll do the Fairfax County side now. As I said, I'm Jennifer Rosales, Department of Transportation. I'm the fund manager for the Tysons Service District Fund. and other funds within the Department of Transportation. On to you, Ray.
All right, thanks, Jen. I'm just trying to buy us a few minutes to get
Of
somebody
course.
else in for a quorum. Ray Johnson, I work for Fairfax County Department of Transportation, the chief of the funding section. I've got a long history with this advisory board. I've been affiliated with it ever since it has been established, which was back in January 2013. So I was staff contact liaison with it or for it for a number of years. But of late it has changed hands, but we have it in good hands right now, which is Jen Rosales. Thank you.
Metachalapo. We're very happy to have Jen on board. I've met you all at the last couple of meetings. I work with Ray and Jen in the coordination and funding division. So nice to see you all.
Nick Alexandro with Fairfax County Department of Transportation, the Capital Projects Division. So I'm the project manager or project coordinator for some of the projects we're going to discuss this evening.
Ted Burkaski, Capital Projects, Fairfax County DOT, working with Nick on some of these projects presented today.
I am Prabha Rollins from Supervisor Bierman's office, just observing. Thank you.
All right, Prabha.
Hi, I'm Linda Colbert, Mayor of Vienna.
Then I'll jump in. I'm Susie Batista with the Department of Planning and Development. I oversee the Urban Center section, and we're going to be giving you development updates this evening that come from the Tysons Tracker, which is our online monitoring platform that is managed by my group in coordination with our partner agencies.
Beth Elliott, I work with Susie Batista in the Urban Center section, and I will be doing tonight's presentation on that section.
Good evening, folks. I'm Chris Caperton. I'm the Deputy Director in the Department of Planning and Development.
I'm Chris Boynton. I'm with representing the MITRE Corporation and the TCA.
Good evening, Jim Policaro. I'm the chair and representing Learner Enterprises at our Tysons 2 portfolio as a commercial property owner.
Yeah, I'm Claudia Diamond. I'm representing residential owners and HOA and civic organizations, part of Hunter Mill District.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Schneider, land use attorney with Holland & Knight, and I'm here on behalf of the Tysons Community Alliance.
Hello, my name is Donald Garrett. I'm a resident of Tysons, and I'm an appointee of the Providence District Supervisor.
I'm Doug Doolittle. I'm a resident at Tysons, and I'm also the board president at the Rotunda in scenic downtown Tysons.
Hi, I'm May. I'm the apartment and the rental owner associate for in Tyson, and I also work for Mace Ridge.
I think that's everybody.
I think that is.
All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started with the presentation. There will be multiple presenters. Again, if at any time you lose audio or you're having trouble hearing one of the presenters, please either put the comment in the chat or raise your hand so that I can be alerted to stop the presentation. All right, and can everyone see the presentation main screen?
Yes.
All right, awesome. All right, so this evening, we're going to be kind of giving an update to the Tysons Transportation Advisory Board on what's going on with the projects. We're going to get an update on the Tysons tracker. We're going to get some background information, and we're going to also go over some financial data. All right, so here's our presentation overview in the order that we will be presenting. Ray Johnson's going to help us and kind of give us the background on the advisory board background information and additional background information, and kind of go over just some helpful information that I think would be important for the advisory board members, especially the newer ones, to know. And then we have Beth that's going to take over, and she's going to give us an update on what's going on with the Tysons tracker. And then Nick is going to give us updates on the transportation projects, and then I'll finish up with all the financial information updates. So hand it over to Ray.
All right, thank you, Jen. Okay, folks, so as you may already know, the advisory board and the service district for which it supports, represents, was approved post Tyson's funding plan approval, but winter 2013 in January. The board was intended to provide input on the annual tax rate for the service district. And that is each year prior to the board's adoption of somebody said, sorry, I think that's Ray Baxter. Okay, sorry about that. But prior to the board's adoption of the next fiscal year's budget, the advisory board, with support of staff, would make recommendations as to what the tax rate should be set at each year at a high level. Transportation project priorities. So we had, in the initial phases of the advisory board, kind of gotten a little bit more under the hood as it relates to projects that that were kind of queued up, if you will, teed up in the cash flow. And several years ago, when we had put this cash flow together, the advisory board had more feedback than we have of late of the past, however many meetings. But that is something that we are intending to correct in the next spring meeting that we have. And then project implementation schedules. So that was to be taken into consideration with development timelines. So the road projects are designed to improve traffic flow into and within Tysons. And we're speaking specifically of projects in the Tysons funding plan, but more specifically those projects that are supported either partially or in whole by the service district. Okay, can you go to the next slide for me, John? All right, so basically we've got a nice cross section of the membership here. I'm not going to name them all out, but the intent was to make sure that we've got fair representation on the advisory board, whether it be from commercial interest, residential interest, etc. So that everybody that has skin in the game, if you will, as far as paying the service district tax, has representation on the board to speak to what that, the current and future rates should be. And go ahead and go to the next slide if you don't mind. Okay, now this is really intended to give you kind of a little bit of background as to why the rate is what it currently is. And, this time 10 years ago, what was the plan a long-term plan, if you would. And we were looking at long-term plans in about the 40-year time frame. So the service district rate was and is based on funding needs of the service district. So we looked at basically a cash flow that was spread out again over 40 years. And it was assumed at the time that development would basically be built out over a 40-year period. Aggressive assumption, if you will, at the time. And I think Beth and Chris will be speaking to where we stand in terms of development levels now compared to where we thought we were going to be this time 10 years ago. But we were looking at a 40-year window of not only having that development built up, but having the transportation projects built that would be supporting that development. So we had, when I say cash flowing out projects, I'm really just talking about programming out revenues and expenditures over that timeline. And we looked at different financial models. So the first one that we had looked at was just stable rates, flat rates. So we looked at 7 and 9 cents. So under both of these models, the rate was proposed to remain unchanged. The service district ultimately would achieve its obligation by 2040. And I believe the time at the horizon that we were looking at the time was about mid 2050s, 2060, that we had anticipated the original funding plan or the life the funding plan would be. So that rate amount was unpopular, to say the least. There were some on the advisory board that weren't necessarily opposed to it. There were others that were not in favor of it. And at the end of the day, the funding really didn't align to our cash needs because we're looking at a 40-year timeline, and it doesn't make sense to collect all the money you need from the service district, by 2040, when you still got 15, 20 years of project implementation to build out. So if the funding, said another way, if the service district can come up with its money by 2040, there's no guarantee that all the other sources of revenue that support the Tysons funding plan would have everything, all the revenue that is needed to meet its obligation in the funding plan. So that the stable rate models, that was kind of shelved. Then we had looked at step rates, and that is 4 to 7. And then we had looked at a 4 to 9 cent raise. So, and it's basically just like it implies. So it starts slow and increases annually. And at the end of the financial model, I believe it actually had stepped down. So looking at these different rates, the cash flow needs, we had determined that under the model, the assumptions at the time, 3% growth, which is something worth mentioning, that under those scenarios, the service district can meet its obligation. It's $253 million in 2012 dollars. Could meet its obligation by 2040. So again, for the reasons as described earlier, that funding model, if you will, really didn't meet the needs of the department, of the advisory board. So then we moved on to what is called at the time, modified bell curve, and I have no idea where it got its name from. But it is basically a gradual step up and then remains flat. I'm pretty sure I can get this one, but gradual step up from 4, 5, and then 6 cents. Then we would remain at 6 cents over a period of years, and then it would jump to 7. And it would only stay at 7 cents for a handful of years, go back down to 6, and then stay at 6 for a number of years, go to 5, back down to 4. So the intent was to try and drag out, if you will, the life of the service district a little bit longer than 2040. And I think 2048 isn't that much longer, but the more I think about it, I think we were originally looking at a cash flow model of about 2055. So again, most years were spent at 6 cents. And the reason we had a 7 cent jump in the model previously is because we had assumed at one point in time that we would bond against the service district. So we had basically assumed that we need X number of dollars from the service district, and under this kind of gradually increasing formula or model, if you will, we needed funding. How do I want to say this? Needed funding a little quicker than anticipated, because we had revised assumptions on either public sources of revenue or Tysons wide road fund revenues. So we had thought to introduce bonding into this particular financial model. So the 7 cent bump only happened once, maybe twice in the original model. Again, the original model is probably about 12 years old, but it was really to meet the financial obligation, the debt service obligation, if you will. So we had put our stamp of approval on that, and had gone to the board with, the advisory board had recommended to the Board of Supervisors a 4 cent rate for the first fiscal year. I want to say it was roughly fiscal 13, 14. Jen's probably going to pull it up here in just a moment anyway. But ultimately the result was all in meeting, cash for projects and meeting debt service obligations over time through 2048. The service district would be paying about $412 million. So that would meet kind of, inflation over time, and the debt service that was assumed at the time. Now, I say that we have, in our previous models, assumed a 3% growth increase, and we generally, when we're doing any sort of out year financial analysis, we will get the blessing, if you will, or concurrence from our budget office as to what rate we would be using for projections like this. So the 3%, we got concurrence from our management and budget office that 3% was ideal. And if we were redoing this today, we probably would still be using at maybe 3%, 2.5%, 3%. But the service district has really exceeded over the past, for the first several years, exceeded that 3% I can tell you once I'm done. Exceed the 3% growth projection rather significantly over, I want to say, the first 6-7 years. So what we've been able to do is, instead of taking the rate from 4 cents to 5 cents to 6 cents, is ultimately holding it at 5 cents. So what we've been able to do is, while we had one financial approach or one model that we were obviously not wedded to, but growth of the service district has allowed us to not have to bond as we had been, not have to bond when we previously thought that we would need to be bonded. And given slower implementation of projects in general, we haven't needed, the amount of service district funding that we had thought we would need upfront, or according to our projections about 12 years ago. And
Ray, are we gonna cover some of this in terms of later on, where you have the comparison and the assessed value history and the service district allocations?
Yes, to some extent, yes.
Yeah.
And we do have a
Yeah,
question.
I think we should, yeah.
All right, Donald, do you want to go
Yeah.
ahead with your question really quick?
Yeah.
Sure. My question is, when we're talking about that 3% growth forecast, is that the forecast in the assessed value? Is that the rate of inflation?
Correct.
Is that interest? Like, what is that? What
Assessed value.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I apologize, Jim. I know I'm taking a little longer than I should be here, but I feel that, and I know I'm probably stealing time from others, but I feel it's crucial, and I think you probably do too, that, folks here that haven't been here for a while need a little bit more of the background that
Yeah, no, that
I haven't got, but I am
that-
actually finished.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that tells the story of the purpose was not to just arbitrarily increase rates and to try to have some sort of logic to how the rates would fluctuate, if at all. And as you mentioned, we've been fortunate to be able to hold that rate at 5 cents for quite a while. And you did a great job explaining that. And hopefully in the future, assessed values and additional activity will allow us to continue that.
Thanks, Jim. Jen,
All right.
you can really go to the next slide now.
Okay, on to the Tysons tracker. Beth, take it away.
Good evening, and thank you guys for the opportunity to present on the Tysons tracker again. I know I've done this in previous years. Next slide, please. So before we dive into the latest set of annual updates that were published last month, October of 2024, we wanted to take a step back and provide a little bit of context. I'm going to trust you guys can all read what's on the slide. I'm not going to read that. But just focused on how Tysons is changing over time and looking at the goals of having 100,000 residents and 200,000 jobs in Tysons by 2050, as Ray was mentioning, in terms of the 40-year plan horizon starting in 2010. And that gets us to the goal of 4-to-1 jobs per household ratio, and really creating this mixed-use employment center. And the plan implementation is one of 20 board follow-on motions related to implementation initiatives and board directives, which include staffing, process, workforce and affordable housing, parks, and transportation initiatives, all of which are included as topical areas in the Tysons tracker. And then we have a web page for the follow-on motion status and updates as well. Next slide, please. So kind of starting to move into where we currently are. This map shows the approved development through the end of May in 2024. And so if you want one quick visual to kind of measure the success of the plan, in our eyes, this may be it. Through the end of May, 44 major rezonings were approved in Tysons, and those are shown in the blue polygons on the map. And if you locate the 4 metro stations, you can really see that most of these rezoning applications are within close proximity to the stations, which is the concept behind transit-oriented development. So in terms of the amount of land area within Tysons, that represents about 30% with an approved development application. And at the time of publication, there were 5 cases under review, including 2 amendment projects to previously approved entitlements. Next slide, please. So diving a little bit more into the details, in case you haven't already explored the extent of the Tysons tracker, we wanted to provide a high-level summary depicting total growth since plan adoption in 2010. So 12.9 million square feet of development has been added within 39 new buildings, increasing the overall development in Tysons by approximately 27%. The proffered public park acreage has increased by 123 acres total, and 41.1 of those acres have been delivered so far. A total of 75.8 million square feet of development has been entitled within 223 buildings. 5,947 new housing units have been constructed, which represent an increase of 77% within Tysons. And we have commitments for 15 new public facilities, and 4 of those have been delivered to date. Next slide, please. So focusing a little bit more on the growth and land use changes, total of 59.8 million square feet of development exists in Tysons as of May 2024. And the use mix remains predominantly office, followed by residential, retail, hotel. And as you can see in the chart on the right side of the screen, we've seen the 27% growth in Tysons from 2011 to 2024. And while we are seeing a decrease in the percentage of office and an increase in residential, the office square footage has increased over time as well. And this is in keeping with plan goals. It was anticipated due to the goal for the jobs to housing balance by increasing the amount of residential use. And in addition, we're seeing the redevelopment of obsolete office buildings with mixed use development, which was anticipated by the plan. Next slide, please. So in starting to look ahead, this maybe kind of gets at what Ray was mentioning earlier. So this graph really looks at comparing the projected development levels, which are shown in blue. This was a model coming from a GMU study for the approval of the plan. And then what is existing over time, shown in the red line, and what is actively under construction, shown in the dashed line. And so the development levels estimated for the near term are generally tracking plan projections, and those are broken down into annual intervals, but they do not account for market fluctuations and other impacts such as metro operations, financing, interest rates, construction costs, etc. And so the gap between the 2 lines shows the capacity for new development under plan projections. And market dynamics are really influencing the reality of the built environment and timing as it relates to the 2050 long-range planning estimates and goals. I do want to note here that, again, this is only capturing what is existing and what is actively under construction. It does not include approved rezonings, final development plans, or anything with a site plan under review or approved currently. And so this only represents a little over a quarter of the plan's long-term projections. But overall growth is about 13.7 million square feet below the projected capacity out of a total of 74 million square feet. And so overall growth has stabilized over the past few years, and this is most likely due to the pandemic, construction costs, and developer financing / interest rates. Again, we are not concerned. We're really looking at this from a long-term vision. So next slide, please. Now I wanted to move into what the current construction activity, again, as of May 31st, 2024, we had 1.3 million square feet of under construction. And so construction activity is continuing across Tysons. The first building on the list here, the Trillium, is a continuing care facility with age-restricted residential, and that was actually delivered the end of the summer, early fall. The Exchange and Somos are both still under construction, and those are workforce and affordable housing projects, but we are seeing construction continue to move forward, and we'll see if it picks up. And then lastly, next slide, please. Just wanted to give you guys some resources in case you were not already familiar with them. Please explore and reach out with any questions and feedback. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much, Beth. All right, moving right along. Next up is going to be Nick Alexandro, and he's going to go over the transportation projects for us.
Yep.
Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next one. So for transportation project implementation, there are really 4 phases. There's preliminary engineering, which is basically the design of the project. There's the right-of-way acquisition, if right-of-way is necessary, which it usually is. After that, we can go through utility relocation, and then after that is construction. And each of these steps in project implementation has its own requires its own funding, obviously. But we do break up the funding in terms of preliminary engineering, right-of-way and utility relocation typically together, and then construction. So next slide. So here is a pretty comprehensive map and list of the 17 Tysons-wide roadway improvements necessary to support the anticipated growth we were just talking about that the comprehensive plan amendment has. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this list and this map before. I'm not going to go through everything on here just because we're going to sort of break it down into kind of what's been done, what's being done over the next few slides. But this sort of illustrates, Tysons wide that there are a lot of planned roadway projects throughout. You see it north, south, east, and west, all through the region. Next. So of those 17 projects, 2 have been completed and 1 is substantially complete. So completed, you see number 3 in green there. It's the Jones Branch connection to I-495. It's over there by the Capital One complex. Connects across the Jones Branch. It connects to 123. It connects to the express lanes. Number 14, you see a little to the south in green. It's the I-95 overpass. That's pedestrian overpass, and then substantially complete. I might not even say substantially complete. It's basically is complete. The Route 7 widening from approximately the Dulles Toll Road all the way to Reston Avenue. That project was completed last summer. There may be a couple of punch list items to get them off bond, but the construction team has basically moved on to a new project within the county at this point. The next. So of these major roadway projects, some are in progress. So in terms of study, we have number 6, 9, and 17. So those really are a single study that I'm the project manager for. We had done a study for looking at toll road ramps into the Tysons grid of streets about 11 years ago, and with the decrease that we've seen in the rate of development, we wanted to relook at things. The study is almost complete, so chances are we're going to have an off ramp only at Boone Boulevard. That's number 9. That gets tied into the number 2, which is the Boone Boulevard extension, and we're probably either going to have a full interchange access at Greensboro or at Jones Branch. So that's at 17 or 6. Other projects on here with the study are Gallows Road widening, like I mentioned before, Boone Boulevard. We are also currently in preliminary engineering for the Route 7 widening, which I'm going to a bit from I-495 to I-66. That's east of Tysons. Design will begin on the Route 7 widening from 123 to I-495, which this board has provided money for. That design is slated to begin administered by VDOT in March of 2025. And there's currently land acquisition going on for the Greensboro Drive extension. And I see a hand up at that. What's the name, Donald?
Yes. My question is, so with the studies you're doing for those exits off the Dulles Toll Road, currently you have to pay the extra like $2 or $2.50 if you ride it past Route 7.
Yeah.
Is any of that like at play for the toll funding? Is that part of the study at all? Or like if these were to get built, would you still likely have to pay that extra $250? 7,
yeah.
or is it completely outside of this?
Yeah, that's being coordinated with MWA as part of the study. They have moved to completely electronic tolling right now, so it probably wouldn't be as stepped like that in the future. And we are working with MWA to determine that as we move forward. Right now, the study is trying to determine what's necessary, and then how they can be built, some very, very preliminary designs, and then later we can move into more preliminary design and more answering more of those questions.
Okay, so I guess that comes when? Like, I mean, is that just is that like a separate discussion of MWA? Is that in conjunction with MWA as part of the preliminary engineering, or?
Yeah, MWA has been working with us through the process to make sure that these ramps work with their future plans, but that's something that they wish to push off because we could be talking years away from implementation for this.
Sure.
So chances are the tolls are going to go up between now and then anyway.
Okay.
Based on the past.
Yeah, the pricing is not the part of the study, basically.
Correct. So next slide. So the first major project we wanted to talk to you about is the Route 7 widening between Route 123 and I-495. Current project estimate is $78.5 million. As you'll see in some slides when we talk about the financial information, about half of that came through the service district, and a little over half of it came through smart scale funding through VDOT. Now, this widening project is being coordinated with the future BRT study. That study is being completed by FCDOT in accordance with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission as well, to determine if and when bus rapid transit can come through the area. If BRT for some reason, if we decide not to do it, we will still be expanding this portion to 8 lanes. With BRT, it would remain 6 vehicular lanes and 2 BRT lanes. Without it, it'd be 8 vehicular lanes. But this project also includes extensive pedestrian and bike improvements, safety improvements, and access management. So even without the BRT, it is a worthwhile project. And the BRT alignment, which will go up international, was approved by the Board of Supervisors in July of 2021. So the BRT wouldn't run this entire length of this corridor, basically about half of it, but we would be improving the entire thing, like I said, to improve safety for vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes, and to significantly improve pedestrian and bike connectivity. The next slide.
Hey, it's Ray Baxter. I seem
Sure.
to have trouble. Could you go back 2 slides? And I just,
Oh, sure.
because I really wanted to talk about my favorite project, which I always do. One more. Okay, so if we look here, we have project 10, project 1, project 11. We finished Route 7, and then we're going on to widen. All of that intersects at the intersection of 123 and 7.
Yes.
And I know that that's a 7B project, but you're going to have huge roads eventually coming into that one small little intersection. Are we going to talk about the 7B and how that might get looked at and funded later on?
We are involved in a study that is actually wrapping up on that. We've been working on it for a number of years. Tad especially can speak to that. Tad has been working on that for over a decade. I mean, if you want to add anything else, Tad.
Yeah, we're basically reviewing the final report. At some point we will share that report with our planning department and as well as with the public and Tysons partnership.
Okay, it just seems like we're going to have, multiple lanes coming from 4 different directions going into a 2-lane overpass, which is just going to cause, and then plus there's no way to walk from 123 from one side to the other side.
Yeah, the study recommends actually removing the interchange and placing the innovative intersection at grade to allow the pedestrian bicycle movement around the intersection.
Okay, you still have then a significant hill to go up to get up to the Tysons Mall, etc. Plus, I don't know how many lanes wide it's going to be, but down further you have the ability for pedestrians to stop underneath the metro. Here, of course, you don't have the metro, and I'm just thinking, if you end up with a 10-lane interchange, what is it going to take for handicapped people to get across and left-hand turns and all of that? I mean, is it, I'm hoping everyone's taking that into consideration. I've done some timing, and it seems to me this could be a 15-minute interchange waiting to go from one direction to the other.
We recommending this intersection called 2-quadrant intersection at grade intersection, which is quite innovative, that would allow the pedestrian and bicycle movement to the intersection. And most of the lanes we have on 123 is 6 lanes, and 6 lanes, also 6 lanes on Route 7. So it's I'll be sharing that report after we review that report and get all the comments incorporated in the report.
Okay, I appreciate that, because
yeah,
that's a concern for my homeowners association. It really prevents people, we live right off of Gallows, from getting from one side of Tysons to the other side of Tysons. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, we're trying to make it more accessible in the future, especially to pedestrians.
Yeah, because even if you get across the street, there's no way to go up the hill you know, particularly if you're ADA, to get up the hill to get to the mall.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jen, you can move a couple slides forward. Okay. This section of the Route 7 widening is between I-495, which picks up where the last one I discussed was, and moves to I-66. This is also where the BRT would go. Eventually, the BRT would be planned to go through Falls Church, through Arlington, back into Fairfax County, you know, through Seven Corners and Bailey's Crossroads, and hopefully down to Alexandria. But what we anticipate for our first phase is that it would go to the West Falls Church Metro, which you could see on the map. Right now, we're working on sort of planning where the BRT lanes are, how the turn lanes would look. You know, if there's any place where we can eliminate double left turn lanes or right turn lanes. Looking at those things, coming up with sort of a plan that we can use to obtain funding from Smart Scale or MBTA in the future. So we do have 10.5 million in service district funds approved right now. And then there's another 100 million, which I believe is mostly right away from MBTA. And like I said, you know, in a couple of years, we'll be attempting smart scale funding with this again. We will be attempting MBTA funding again next year, and we'll be looking to start that design once we sort of approve the BRT coming through here. Next slide. Again, this is what I was discussing previously with the Dulles Road ramp connections. This study is going to wrap up very soon. We're kind of in the final analysis, sort of final compilation of the report by our consultant. We're looking at most likely at number 9 there below. We're looking at just an off ramp. A full connection would be likely very expensive, and there's a lot of grade problems because there's a lot of bridges over there with the metro bridges and the interchange bridges. And then we would have a full interchange at either location, number 6 or number 17. The final report will sort of recommend which is better, not only from a traffic standpoint, but from, you know, maybe sort of a land acquisition and buildability standpoint. It might be cheaper. So we'll have a recommendation as to where that other connection will come. And, you know, we have $1 million in the service funds approved for the feasibility study, which we have been using for the last couple of years to complete this study. Next one. There are 5 projects with future implementation. Now the 7 and 8, these westbound collector and eastbound collector distributor, they're sort of tied into the toll road ramps studies that I was just discussing. The previous study that we did 11 years ago, there was, you know, a decent amount of traffic, and those distributors were sort of chasing pretty far to the west. We don't anticipate that now, but we do anticipate that collector distributor roads between those ramps, and which also connect to the International and Spring Hill interchange and Route 7 will be part of that project. So that's sort of take 7 and 8. And then we also have the Route 123 widening between Old Courthouse and Route 7, which is currently in our planning department at FCDOT, and the McGarrity Road widening and potential additional lane on the outer loop of the Beltway, which is also future planning efforts from our planning department at FCDOT. Next one. That's for me. So if anybody has any more questions for me, I'm here to answer them before Jennifer gets into the financial information.
Sorry, my question is, I mean, I just want to echo what Ray was saying on that last slide. You were widening like Route 123, and so it's really put a plug out there for also dealing with the interchange too. When you're widening the road that leads to the interchange, I think that's very important.
Yeah, the interchange is actually much further along than the widening of 123 as far as where the projects are.
Oh, okay. I always thought you like further along, like geographically. I was like, put the map back up.
Oh, no. Like Tad said, that study is, going to be reviewed. And right now, the Route 123 widening projects are gone through a very early planning stage. And it'll be, another couple of years before we get it to the stage where even the 123 and Route 7 interchanges.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for the update for those projects. I think those are great and it's very important, especially a lot of the office, they are going back to office to work. For example, Amazon is like 5 days a week. So the traffic is going to be probably really bad, especially during the rush hour. I think this is very important to get this into our timeline.
Thank you.
So let me ask this, Ray Baxter, once more. Not about 123, but how involved is this particular board with the potential on the horizon of maybe a casino and right in the heart of our district?
I cannot answer. I cannot. I
We don't
can't answer.
have any
I don't know if that's been
information
looked
on
at by our site analysis department, if that's been brought up, or NDPD. I mean, I know it's rumored, but I don't know if there's anything concrete out there.
Well, I do know, I've been following it. I mean, it's going to come up in the legislature in 2025.
Mhm.
It may eventually come to a referendum. I don't know how within Fairfax County, lots of tax revenue, it's hard to tell which way it's going to go. But obviously, a lot of the planning we're doing here, I would assume that this committee has to be integrally involved in any input as far as traffic studies, as far as what it's going to do to our current 40 or 48, the plan. So I just wondered whether, when does this board get involved, or do we not get involved, or how quickly does FCDOT or VDOT get involved in something like that?
Well, if it was planned, FCDOT would be heavily involved. I mean, it would go through our site analysis department, and it would come through all of us, and it would be a priority for us as we investigated it. But something concrete case and a concrete proposal would have to come to us.
Yeah, well, that's hopefully way in the future, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any more questions for Nick? I don't see any hands up. Okay, moving on to financial information. We're almost there, guys. All right. So just very high level, when we're talking about service district revenue to date, you can see here on the first row, this is just fiscal year 2014 through 2024. We brought in a total of 82.7. And then taxes collected just here is a 79. And then interest collected on the taxes collected, we had 3.7 to date. Just looking at fiscal year 25 as a standalone to date, and when I say to date, it's as of November 8th. So we had 4.9 collected. Of that 4.9, 4.6 was just tax revenue on its own, and then 420K, give or take, is just in our interest that has been collected on the money, bringing us to a grand total collected to date from fiscal year 2014 through November 8th, 2024. We brought in between taxes and interest 87.7. Currently allocated to projects, and this is funding that has been approved by this board. We have 64.2, leaving 23.5 available for project funds. But just so I can make it clear, when we're talking about available project funds, so this is funding available to construct projects currently in preliminary engineering or design. This is not just, money we can just put on projects as we see fit. These are designed for, all of these project funds are earmarked for projects that are already approved. Okay, so now when Nick went through all of the projects that kind of have money on them or are in progress or have been completed. So now this is kind of the financial side of all those projects. For the first two, we have the Route 7 widening. And so we have two different segments. And as Nick pointed out, when we look at the current project estimate, for example, project number 1, Route 7 widening, the current project estimate is 78.5. And of that 78.5 million, we have approved service district funding of 35 million, meaning that this service district board has approved the use of $35 million to be put on this project. And we have no money spended through November 8th as of right now. And then we have other approved funding from other sources. We have 38.5 sitting from other funding sources, leaving us with a balance, give or take, of 5 million that we will need to finish the project. Looking at the second project, project number 12, this is another segment of the Route 7 widening. This is a much larger section, as you can see, 256.8 million for this project estimate, and only 10.5 currently have been approved by the Service District Advisory Board to be used on this project. And only 50,000 has been spent to date. We are getting some funding, other funding sources of 106 million. And so we're still have a variance of about 140 million that we will need before we can complete this project. We have two projects that for Route 123 widening, one that's 28 million and one is 67, give or take, million. We have a little bit of service district funding that was allocated to these, but they're currently deferred. And before we ask questions on what's currently deferred, let me finish with the table, and then if there's a question, Ray can answer it for you. And then when we're looking at the Dulles Toll Road ramp connection, and this is what Nick was explaining, it's kind of like a package of multiple projects that were included in the feasibility study. This is just the feasibility study alone. This doesn't include all the engineering and the construction. So just the study alone was about $1 million, and that $1 million was covered in full by the district funds. And so we're still finishing up. 800,000 has been spent already, and basically the feasibility study has been completed. And then the last two projects we have completed. Number 4 is the Route 7 widening, another section of Route 7 widening. That one was 314 million, and about 9 million of that came from the service district funds. So as you can see, this is a really good example of how, we have these really large projects, and it may be a smaller portion from the service district or a larger portion from the service district, but nonetheless, all service district funding is important for these projects, whether it's getting off the ground and getting a study done or working through some preliminary engineering. All the funds that are allocated, usually are more towards the front end of the project. And so we had 9 million that was applied to this project in particular, and this one's basically complete. And same thing with number 14 for the Tysons Old Methodist, the pedestrian bridge. This one was about 13.4 million, and 5 million of that. So for this one, more of the service district money was applied to the project to help complete it, and this one is complete. So are there any questions about the currently deferred so that Ray can address those, or are we good to go? They're just kind of pushed back. All right, I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, so looking at the assessed value history, so this is kind of going back to when Ray was talking about the modified bell curve and all of the rates that are applied to the assessed value in the Tysons area. So starting in 2014, this is where we were in, remember, this is in the billions. So we can see that we ventured up. 2020, COVID hit, we had a slight dip. We kind of recovered, continued to recover, and we just have a difference here of about 60 million, and that is a combination of like land assessment and development. So I don't know that we are currently concerned about this small dip, but I'm keeping track with the tax office to make sure that once we get the new assessed values in 2025, I'll be sharing those with the board members. All right, and then this is just,
Jen,
oh, yep.
can we pause? Jim has a
Sure.
question.
Yes. Do you need me to go back one slide, Jim?
Well, my original question, yeah, one more, two more.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
actually that one.
Okay.
It seems like there's a balance need on project one. There's a balance needed of a small amount of $5 million comparatively. I'd noticed the design is going to start in earnest at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, I believe is what one of the graphics showed.
Mhm.
So do you have any indication of when that design will be completed? And then I would presume that during that time period that 5 million can be either reallocated or raised in order to kick that project off. Do you have a time frame on when that project would start?
Can you answer that question for him, Ray, or do you want Nick to do it?
When
Or Tad?
design, if is Nick or Tad still here?
Yes, I'm
Tad.
still on. Well, actually, that project's going to be administered by VDOT.
Right.
They already selected the consultant, and they're working on the final estimate. And I think we're working on the agreement with VDOT, correct, Ray?
I think you guys finalized that agreement, but
Yeah.
they're starting.
They're
They're going to give NTP to the consultant anticipated in March.
Yeah.
They're working through their contract right now with the consultant.
Okay.
Mhm. And as far as the balance needed, we will look at all sources that we have available. Is there an outside chance we may come back to the advisory board to request additional funding on the project? There definitely is, but I mean, we're going to look at all sources of revenue, because another source of revenue that can be used for this particular project is the Tysons wide offers developer contributions in the Tysons Wide Road Fund. So if we have available funding from that source, that will also be considered.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. We good? All right.
We're good. I did have a question briefly, and you might get to it on the next one. Have you all forecasted, well, where we saw the assessed value history, I think, was there any long-term forecasting of that assessed value? If you go back one slide. You can see it starting to rise, and then of course with COVID, in between 2020 and 2024, various factors, we've had increased assessed values of what we had. We've had a slowdown in construction. The increased values have offset that, I believe. But now we're getting to the point where maybe things are a little more stable. And so at least in terms of COVID and people coming back to work. But I guess the question in mind is have you looked at in the county any forecasting of what the future holds, maybe a 5-year forecast of what the future holds for the assessed value?
I would suspect that our budget office, tax administration office, they're doing assessed value forecasting for their own uses. We will do it and get concurrence buy-in from those offices that I had mentioned, for the sake of the updated cash flow, which we're planning on bringing back to you guys.
Yeah, I think it speaks to maybe the next slide. I see where the average growth, and Jennifer can go through it. I didn't want to interrupt her
Yeah, no worries.
presentation. But when
Yeah,
do
so
you think will that be something that might be something we'll discuss at the spring meeting?
Yes. Yep. We'll have updates in the spring meeting for the funding plan that will include some projections that, we will have to consult with DMB and management and budget, and then the tax administration too, and just make sure that our projections are aligning with their projections and plug that into the funding plan so we can bring that back to you.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, so
Okay,
the
great.
year, okay, perfect. So then the year-over-year comparison, again, keeping in mind that we don't have the assessed values for 2025 yet, because we'll get them on January 1st, 2025. So just looking at 2023 calendar year and 2024 calendar year, we do see a slight dip. So when we're looking at that for the growth over the prior year, so we have the slight dip of 0.34%. But the Tysons district tax rate stayed steady at the 0.05, so 5 cents. And then just for sake of comparison, we also put up on here that the Dulles Rail Phase 1 tax rate is still 9 cents. And then that combined is 14. But, just to be clear, this board doesn't have authority over the Dulles Rail Phase 1 tax rate, but we like to put it up there so that everyone is aware that there are other tax rates that are applied. And then before I go over this, are there any questions on the financial information? I don't see any raised hands. Okay, so that brings us here to the end. So the next spring meeting, we don't have a date set yet, but the big things that we'll be going over in the spring, we will be bringing to you an updated funding plan. If there are any new allocation requests for projects, we will be presenting those as well. And then we're going to vote on the rate recommendation for fiscal year 2026. And that is the end. Are there any questions, concerns? Yes, Ray.
You can add to your spring meeting forward looking the fact that you're going to need to have the advisory board approve minutes from the last spring meeting that we had. You just lost your quorum about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. So I'll have the March 18th, 2024 meeting minutes, and then today's meeting minutes in the spring meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. All right, now. Okay, so then the next thing on the agenda is if we have any public comment. I didn't see anyone who called in or attended that wasn't on the invite or that I knew of.
You've only got staff on and advisory board members.
Yep. All right. So then I guess, Jim, I turn it over to you.
I would just say, again, I think the moral of the story is for 2026, you are recommending that we're going to keep the rate at 5 cents, I believe. That's
correct.
That's good news. And then, and just maybe to allay everybody's fears about what happens in the future, hopefully the economy will start improving as we move out of 2020 and beyond. But again, we talked about that forecasting but at least in the near term, that 5 cent rate appears to be intact, which I think is a good thing. Other than that, I would just say thank you very much for the presentation. There was a lot of good information here, and I think it was good to get a refresher and a new look for the new people. So other than that, I would just say just a really good job with the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. If there aren't any other comments from anyone else, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. And if there's anything that you need between now and the spring meeting, everyone has my email. You can reach out to me directly and I can help you as best as I can. And as a reminder, in 10 days, I'll get everything updated on the website with the recording. That's it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
Enjoy your
everyone for
holiday.
attending.
Bye.
Yeah, you too.